Therefore it says, wake up, sleeper. Get up from the dead. Christ will shine on you. So be careful to live your life wisely, not foolishly. Take advantage of every opportunity because these are evil times. Because of this, don't be ignorant, but understand the Lord's will. Saints of God, our eyes have seen the glory and the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the village with the grapes of wrath of storm. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I see him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dew and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on.
And good morning, my good friends. It has been a while since we've been able to join each other here for Conversation with Faith Leaders, but I am delighted to be able to join you this morning to talk about some important topics, to have a good conversation in honor and celebration of HerStory Month. I could not allow the month of March to pass, and I did not take time to celebrate and honor women for the work that they continuously do on an everyday basis, and to have a conversation that would be both philosophical, religious, social, political, maybe a tad bit controversial. However, we needed to be able to have this conversation and to be able to record this moment as we talk about HerStory Month and as we talk about those things that are important to the celebration of HerStory Month. So I'm delighted to be able to have some good friends with me to be able to articulate this conversation. As always, it's good to have my sister, my friend, the Reverend Dr. Diana Watkins Dickinson, who is a prolific preacher, writer. She is a college professor. She is a married woman. She is a mother of two budding, beautiful Black children. She is my friend. She is my sister. So I'm delighted to be able to have her here with me. I also have with me my friend, the outspoken preacher and woman herself, the Reverend Antonia Ruth. She is from Chicago, Illinois. She is a wonderful person that I have met through Clubhouse, and we have been able to develop and maintain a friendship. We've done work together with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, of which she is an integral part of the home office there in Chicago. And then joining us later will be my friend, Chanel Oliver. Chanel and I met in college at HCAS, Honda Campus All-Star Challenge in Orlando, Florida, when I was in college. We've both been on the team. We both participated in that academic bowl. And from college to now, we've been able to maintain a good friendship. And she is a journalist. She's a social worker. She's a mom. She is a community activist. She's a world traveler. She amazed me when she took her and her mom to Ghana. Even in the midst of COVID-19, she's a brave woman. So she will be joining us in just a few minutes. So I want to invite you to share this feed. I know it's a little early. It's not that early. Diana is a military, so this is nothing for her. She gets up and do boot camp and running and all that wonderful stuff. So this is nothing for her. The rest of us is dragging just a smidget. But come on in the room, share the feed. We're live on Facebook on our show's page, Conversation with Faith Leaders, as well as YouTube. So come on in the room, amazing people, and let's have this great and good conversation. You will not be disappointed. Come on in the room. I'm glad to have you here. Let me welcome my friends, Dr. Watkins Dickerson and Reverend Anthony Roof. Ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. So I know it's just a tad bit early, but let me say again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with me today. I could not let this moment pass, and we did not have a conversation that honored women and that celebrated HerStory Month. Just a brief moment of my introduction to HerStory Month. When I was a student at Payne Theological Seminary, the president of the school was Dr. Leah Gaskin Fitzhugh, Reverend Dr. Leah Gaskin Fitzhugh. She was the first woman president of any major theological seminary in the country. She was definitely the first woman president at Payne Theological Seminary, and I had the profound pleasure of being a student under her presidency. It was a requirement in order to graduate with your Master's of Divinity degree from Payne Theological Seminary, who's Afrocentric focused. You learned everything that you would learn in a traditional theological seminary, but with an Afrocentrism. You could not graduate unless you took HerStory Month class intensive. It was you just couldn't do it. Believe me, there were men. There were some men. I'm not going to say what denomination, but it was some AMEs and a whole lot of Baptists who struggled taking that class. It was a struggle. The professor, Dr. Renee Harrison, who now teaches at Howard Divinity School in Washington, D.C., she did not have any mercy on men or women in the class. It was a week-long intensive, started at 8 in the morning, ended around 6 in the evening, Monday through Friday. Friday was the last day. You thought, well, hey, they might, let up on us. It didn't happen. It was a week-long intensive. And that was my introduction to ever hearing HerStory Month. There was a chapel that inaugurated each year, a big convocation held on the campus. Dr. Fitzhugh would invite a woman preacher, and usually she would invite someone within our ranks, a student within our ranks, to preach that chapel service. Board of Trustee members would show up, and you would get this intensive learning about the plight of womanhood. You would learn about the struggles of womanhood. You would learn about, how we have failed to show inclusivity. It was an amazing experience that I'm grateful that I had. And it changed my life. I have on my bookshelf in my dining room several of those books that were a part of that intensive because it changed my life. And so I'm glad to be able to have been changed, influenced, better equipped to respect womanhood, to understand that this isn't just something women did because they want to be recognized. This is something that needed to be done because Black women particularly need to be recognized and honored and cherished and respected. And so, hey, there's my classmate, the Reverend Sandrea Tolbert. We was in that same intensive together. Amen. It was a wonderful experience. Changed my life. So, ladies, not to belabor the moment, I want to go ahead and allow you to introduce yourselves. So please come off mute and tell us about yourselves and where you are, and then we'll go ahead and get this conversation rolling. Both of you are muted.
Okay, well, I think I got the cue to go first from Reverend Antonia. Good morning to all of you in these Facebook streets. Good morning to the YouTube streets. It's with just pleasure and honor. It's my privilege to be on this show again with Dr. Davis. My name is Diana Watkins Dickerson. I am a preacher, a scholar. I am a military veteran. I'm still in the military, actually, as an Air Force chaplain. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation today. This is deep within my interests, just talking about women, in particular, Black women. And so I'm just so excited to discuss this topic. I could go on for days and weeks and years about this. So I'm not going to belabor the point of my introduction because I know we're going to jump in, and I'm just so excited to be here with Reverend Antonia as well.
Good morning. I am Reverend Antonia, and I am from the Windy City, Chicago, Illinois. So it's a bit earlier than it is for Dr. Brandon. But at the same time, I am excited to be here. Like he said, I do work at the home office for the Samuel Dwight Proctor Conference. I serve as the program coordinator for, it's a long title, so hold on, the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation, and Remediation. It is a joint initiative between the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference and McCormick Theological Seminary, and we are doing the work of reparations till justice comes. So thank you, Brandon, for allowing us to have this opportunity. I will talk about women. I've been a womanist since I was 13 when I read the description in Alice Walker's book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And that has been many, 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 many moons ago. So thank you. And I am so grateful and glad to be here.
Listen, this is going to be great. This is really going to be great. I'm so glad to have you all here. And I can't wait for Chanel to get here because Chanel is going to bring some spice to this thing. That I hope she can get here before we get to this Muhammad Ali video. But my first question, ladies, hold on one second. Somebody's trying to call me. The first question: how has the view and image of womanhood been challenged or better influenced since COVID-19? And I'll put it on the screen. But here's the question: how has the view and image of womanhood been challenged or better influenced since COVID-19? Who wants to jump in first?
So my facial expressions, I'm not really great at hiding my expression because I think this question is so loaded. And please excuse me, Reverend Antonia, I'm so glad that you helped me with it, how to pronounce your name. So excuse me for that. Since COVID-19, has it gotten better? No, absolutely not. I think we still see women, and particularly Black women, as things that can be bought and traded, right? We're still in this moment of COVID-19. So let's just say that right now. Please get vaccinated, wear your mask, right? But in this moment right now, actually, we discussed this a few days ago. Brittany Griner, we all know is a superstar basketball player, is being held in Russia, and they're seeing her as a bartering tool with this Ukrainian conflict. And so with that being said, I'm not certain that COVID-19 has really influenced this for better or for worse. I think it's just what it is. I mean, women in general, Black women in particular, are always seen as devices to be controlled by men. And I also identify as a womanist, and particularly as a rhetorician, studying the ways in which Black women come to voice, especially in this time. I think in many ways, we've heard more from women overall during this time, and maybe we've seen, or I wouldn't even say see them, we've viewed them more, but I would say view as this idea of consuming them, right? And we like to consume women's bodies and however that benefits us. And so I'm not necessarily sure it's been better influence since COVID-19. I think we view them, and then in the Black church, we've heard this before, right? It's better to be seen than viewed. And I'm not quite sure if we really do see Black women. And I'm not sure that COVID-19 has really helped that at all.
I would like to also add the intense, oh, let me kick this off. The intense mammification of Black women during COVID-19. There is this expectancy that Black women would know all of the remedies, would have all of the secret and tinctures, would have an insight to what would be a good natural healing. And the level of people coming and surrounding Black women during this time, because they're saying that we're moving from pandemic to endemic. So here in Illinois, our public health official, the chief public health official, was a Black woman. And each week there was this thing where she would have the answers. And since in Illinois she had the answers, there was this expectation that all Black women would have the answers. I had people walking up to me in grocery stores. Now, why are you buying oranges and ginger root? Does that do anything? You have ginger ale in your basket. Yeah, because I want some Canada Dry. That's the reason I have ginger ale in my basket. So this additional, in addition to not being seen, but being viewed, the addition to consuming us, there's this also mammification that caused Black women to become insular and to depend on each other and to read about each other and just turn away patriarchy as a whole, like Pink Robe Chronicles and Dr. Melva Sampson. She was tired and grew, a bunch of us were just grew tired of white man Jesus and white man God. And all of the white men that have written about white man Jesus and white man God. So we started reading words from our sisters, Black women, and that's where we find our sacred text.
So there has not been much of a change in the view of womanhood, in the respect of womanhood. One thing I can say is that I did notice at the height of the pandemic, there were several conversations that I observed from the news media about women in domestic violence situations, children in abusive homes. There was a lot of statistics that was being put out there. There was a small window of coverage, and if I'm wrong in that assessment, please correct me. But I think there was a small window of coverage as it talked about women in those situations, as it talked about children in those situations, and then it just kind of the narrative just kind of fluctuated between politics and COVID, stay open or shut down. Let me recognize the phenomenal Reverend Dr. Dennis Dickinson, Dr. Diana Dickinson, Watkins Dickinson's father-in-law, and my friend, former general officer of the AME Church. I just love that he's on Facebook. What a jewel. Thank you for your presence, sir. But when it came down to woman issues, and if I'm using that in the right context, please let me know. But when it came down to issues concerning women, the conversation just, it started out, let's bring this to your attention, and then we kind of forgot about it. So as we move forward, and I love that term that you just described and used, mammification. The Black woman in particular has always been the point of connection when it came to survival. Children look to mama. Men look to the woman when it comes to survival, understanding where do we go from here, what do we do next. But when it comes to the value and the respect of womanhood, it seems like, we would rather find comfort and solace in another man versus respecting the thoughts and opinions of another woman. Am I in this? Am I in the room?
I'll say these few things before I forget. And I've said this before on Facebook Live. I do have intense baby brain. So I kind of want to get it out before I forget. For one, I would say, Reverend Antonia, I didn't know you were a PRC member of the congregation, of the community. So, hello, my sister. And she's absolutely right that in one way, Black women have been creating their own hush harbors, brush harbors to ensure that we are fed and that we're made full, because this world is so violent, right? And she uses this term, the mammification of Black women. Typically, Black women, we put them in some sort of caricature, right? They're either the mammy, the Jezebel. We can go on and on and on, and how these are categorized. And we can save that for another time, but she's absolutely right. So I just want to foot stomp that Black women are made to take care of everyone else, but not themselves, right? The other thing that you mentioned, though, Dr. Davis, you said women's issues. Well, all issues are women's issues, right? Because in particular to Black women, that I would like to center and kind of what my colleague here on the panel has discussed, some of the chief medical officers that have been that are virologists, biologists, the Shelby County Commissioner of Health here, I think that's the correct title, is actually one of my colleagues in the military, Dr. Michelle Taylor. And she has had death threats in this whole situation, right? And the way in which health, a pandemic where it is proven that vaccinations work, it is proven that masks work, it is proven that all of these things that we're trying to do to ensure people's safety is working, but she's receiving death threats and has to have a police escort, right? And people are calling her a liar. Now, when she's in military uniform, and when I'm in military uniform as well, thank you for your service. Oh, thank you so much, right? And in that way, maybe we're seen and appreciated. But it's just very different when we change the uniform and go about our day-to-day lives. And I guess want to highlight that any issue that's happening around the world is a woman's issue. And I think we like to kind of bracket and suspend things that are uncomfortable, particularly maybe that internalized patriarchy or internalized. And of course, these issues are attached to race, gender, class, add an ism, right? But everything is a woman's issue. Everything is a human issue. I do think we have to parse out things that affect and affect women in different ways, but everything is an issue, right? That we should discuss, and we should think through ways that women are not just battered and bruised in society, but also in private spaces. And you're absolutely right. There was a little bit of coverage at first, but that, it's a little bit too much. We don't want to see women claiming their voices and speaking their truths, because it makes us uncomfortable, right? And we have to deal with that level of discomfort. And so I think one of the ways, at least just off the top of my head, that we can move forward is continuing conversations like these, right? And seeing women and I guess maybe I don't want to jump too far into the video, but protecting Black women, which I know Malcolm X was one within the Nation of Islam, which still has its issues, right? But that's something that we really do have to take charge and do.
And might I add, hey, fellow Pink Robe Chronicles sister, Reverend Diana. And I want to say also hello to Dr. Jamie, who is also in the Hush Harbor with us every Sunday morning. You talk, listen, at the height, let me say this, at the height at the beginning of the pandemic. And all the grocery stores were bare and to the bones. And I remember I just needed to go to the grocery store because I had needed groceries. But, looking at these empty shelves, and I came across two women in a Whole Foods, and they were two Black sisters, and they were talking amongst themselves, and they were saying long medical terms. And they looked at me and they saw that I was standing there listening. And they were like, "Come here, sweetheart. You need to know this." And they began to share and to talk about different things. Come to find out that one was an epidemiologist and the other one, it was a virologist. So, yeah, listening to them share and tell me what to do, she was like, "This is the time where you need to rely on your ancestors, call on your grandmamas and ask them how you should be healed." And I was like, "Okay." And I'm walking through the store. "Grandmas, what do I need to pick up in the store to eat to survive this thing?" And I mentioned that story because as an additional foot stop to what we are saying here, how women, Black women in particular, are viewed and not seen. Um, you mentioned, Dr. Davis, value and respect, and then men turn within themselves. But and they also turn within themselves when it comes to Black women's pleasure. Mhm.
Reverend Ruth, you don't have to pause. It's not necessary for me to say that you're in a safe space.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you all, Reverend Ruth.
Talk about it.
And I am not embarrassed. I am not bashful. I am not ashamed to be her friend. That is my sister. That is my friend. So you don't have to pause. Go ahead, Reverend. Teach us, okay?
When it comes to Black women's pleasure, men, no matter the race, culture, creed, or religious declaration, there is a possession of Black women's pleasure and a control of Black women's pleasure. Even within this pandemic, I'm staying within the pandemic, it was even more pronounced because not only did the pandemic suspend briefly outside, relationships, but it also had men thinking that they had the control because they made the decisions to when to go and have their pleasure needs felt. And if they weren't allowed to have if they didn't go out to get their pleasure felt with that particular woman, then that particular woman was not allowed to explore her pleasures. And when I say pleasure, I'm referring to sex. They were not allowed to have sexual encounters with anyone else or themselves because of that primary man did not give them the permission. So it was this pandemic heightened the ownership feeling and ownership thought that some majority of the men have, especially those men who have a partner or a wife at home who and then a mistress and or a side chick. Those are two different things, a mistress and a side chick. And then just a piece of something to go. Those are three different categories. So the man had that. And if who he allowed to additionally enter his property. So that too was heightened in the pandemic.
I want to throw a word out here. I did some work on behalf of my business content writing service, thanks to the recommendation of the Reverend Antonia Ruth, for the Sammy DeWitt Proctor Conference. And in doing that work, some of the transcription work that I was paid to do, I was given some beforehand insight to what they're getting ready to release, what they're actually in the process of releasing, a part of their catalog, their educational catalog. I am nowhere in this field of a rhetorician that I want to be compared to my sister, Dr. Diana Watkins Dickinson. I ascribe to be a rhetorician like she is. You're my rhetorician hero. But there's a word that has stuck with me that I heard in a sermon preached by my mind is slipping. The Reverend Dr. James A. Forbes. The word is pseudo-subspeciation. Reverend Antonia, pseudo-subspeciation. I cannot forget that word. And honestly, every opportunity I get to use that word, to introduce that word to someone else's vocabulary, I take the chance. Pseudo-subspeciation refers to the claim that cultural differences causes humans to separate into different social groups. Are we still doing pseudo-subspeciation in the African American culture amongst men and women and amongst women?
I have a question first. So I'm a rhetorician, not a linguist, I think. And so my question is kind of back to you, Dr. Davis, so we can get a little more clarification. Pseudo-subspeciation, I'm not sure if I'm saying it.
You said it right.
Okay. Who came up with the term? I know there's some Greek there, and obviously Dennis could really help us with this. But so Dennis, go ahead. This is my husband, Dr. Dickerson Jr. So if he can type in there. But my question is really around the etymology of the word, particularly who coined this term and coined the definition and put this together, and how this language has been, how this term has been appropriated or practiced, right? Because I think it matters, you know, if it's you, Dr. Davis, or you, Reverend Antonia, that's one thing, right? But how words are formed and normed in another culture or society, and how whiteness, of course, can affect that makes a difference. So that's my question.
So the word, the etymology, and I did Google this when I first learned it. I did not find the etymology. All I could find was reference to a posting in the Oxford English Dictionary. The word was first termed or coined by Erik Erikson in 1966, according to a biographer by who did work on Erik Erikson, Lawrence J. Friedman. But I did not find the etymology of the word. I think it's one of those terms or words that were created to make a point.
So, baby brain once again. Erikson is he German, Austrian? I can't remember. But he was a psychologist. I just remember
Danish, German, American developmental psychologist.
Okay. And so I came into contact with him and some of his work when I actually started out in education in undergrad. And I can't remember everything, but I do know he's in the field of psychology. And so let's pause right there. There's a difference between taking courses in educational psychology and getting all of the foundational lenses and theoretical perspectives and philosophies that you'll get. I remember Friedman, Erikson, Pavlov, right? We can keep going. I think who was tabula rasa? I think that was John Locke. I mean, you know, so all
That's
these
right.
philosophers, psychologists. Well, I actually took African American psychology with Dr. Angela Watkins, who was a niece of Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King at Spelman. And it was like a total 360. I say 360 because you turn around and you just find something completely different. Not that the same thing is there. Like you're in it's a whole new world, as Jasmine said, right? And with that being said, she opened up our eyes to show the racism, right, that's attached to the field of, well, every field, but psychology in particular. But then also, when we create these terms, right, how racism, I mean, we always have time for racism across the world, not just in this country, let's be clear. My cousin said this a few days ago. And with that being said, I'm very leery in answering this question, because I think because racism is such an issue and it's so embedded in our society, that we are forced to a degree, because we're rejected by white society so frequently, and women in general, Black women in particular, are rejected in society. And so in many ways, I'm not even sure if this term can apply to many of the things. I don't know, for me at least, but maybe even Reverend Antonia. I'm not sure if this can be appropriated or taken up in the same way, as like, oh, we're just going off into our little silos or whatnot. I'm not sure it applies.
So the context that Reverend Dr. Forbes used it in was to reference in the dehumanization of Black people. So in terms of, so let me just give you the actual definition, and well, let me give you the definition that he gave in the sermon that he preached. Pseudo-speciation refers to the claim that cultural differences causes humans to separate into different social groups with different languages, dress, customs, etc. These cultural differences are claimed to be analogous to the formation of different biological species, speciation. So when I look at the word, I'm asking, within the African American community, we know that there are sects within our community. We know very well there's the have and the have-nots within our community. There's the low class, there's the high class within our community. We separate amongst the genders, amongst the skin tones. We separate, amongst education. Do you have an Ivy League education? Did you go to HBCU? We have women who are considered to be, natural women because they don't process their hair, they don't put chemicals in their hair. We have men who are considered to be, a dominant man, or a man of the time, based upon how they treat other people, their education, their level of education, their level of understanding. So I'm asking, within the culture of African Americans, particularly women, is there an act of pseudo-speciation, a separation, and has that deepened because of COVID-19, or has it just deepened because that has been the struggle amongst women, Black women, is what I'm asking.
I would say, in layman's terms, it's a fed upness, since we want to create words, the fed upness of Black women. Like I mentioned earlier, with digital hush harbors and brush harbors, for us to go more within, and due to the pandemic, because we're fed up. We're fed up with not being seen. We're fed up with not being heard. We're fed up with not being pleasured. We're fed up with having the idea of being the many-breasted one. We're fed up with being called Jezebel. We're fed up with being called being pulled on to be the rescuers, to put on our capes or our superhero costume that's super pleasing to the man's sexual position, but not necessarily for our benefit. We're fed up. So yes, it's caused a separation of sorts, but I wouldn't say the pandemic caused it. I will say the pandemic enhanced it. The pandemic brought it to the attention of non-Black women, in order for them to say, hey, we really are separated. There is really a separation here. So now let's have this conversation, because we all have the same enemy, and the same enemy is killing everybody in different ways and different rates. But this we have a common enemy. So that was the need for us to, let's build community, let's come together. And it's like, no, where you been, Doc, sis?
Mm-hmm. I'm like just nodding my head at everything she's saying, and actually looking up in my own notes from a paper I just edited, and I added the womanist definition. As Reverend Antonia said, this definition comes in the more extended form in Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Alice Walker's text in 1983. She actually uses the term womanist in her short story Coming Apart in 1979. And that interaction, even in that text, is in many ways her husband or her partner preferring sexual arousal, um, the complications of sexual arousal from other women and not necessarily from her, and how that's kind of exploited, right? But the definition actually lays this out, and lays out exactly what Reverend Antonia was saying in the second part. A woman who loves other women sexually or non-sexually, appreciate and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility, values tears as natural counterbalance of laughter. So I'm thinking of Matt, and just overall balance, which you mentioned Afrocentricity earlier, Dr. Davis, but prefers women's strength. Sometimes loves individual men, committed to survival and wholeness of an entire people, male and female. And this is the part that I think Reverend Antonia was really getting at. Not a separatist, except periodically for health, right? Not a separatist, except periodically for health. And I think that's really important, that, when we think about Black women maybe going into our own silos, or going, Pink Robe Chronicles, I think is a wonderful space in which we do this. I'm sure there are others, but this hush harbor allows us to not just come to voice, but that voice to be heard, our bodies to be seen and not consumed, but to be deemed pleasurable for our own help, and for our own desires, and just to be accepted as we are, right? And so I think when it happens, when you see Black women kind of going off into their own spaces, it's for health reasons. It's to make sure that, out of the words of, oh gosh, DMX, y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here, up in here. Or even if I go to misbehaving, I think she's from Shreveport, Louisiana. I don't fight, I don't argue, I just hit with a bottle. Like, I don't want to hit you with a bottle. I don't take me there, right? I need to separate and make sure that I'm getting that important tenet, that radical self love, redemptive self love, and I'm able to survive, but also thrive in this space, so that the rest of y'all are safe. Because there have been some times, I thank God for grace and for mercy, not ending up in jail, because even though it wasn't my fault, I would be the person viewed as suspicious in the situation. So I just wanted to kind of add that point.
And I'm sorry, Dr.
Go ahead.
Dick,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
but I'm looking, is that Bishop Dickerson or Mr. Reverend
That's
Dr.?
Dr. Dickerson. He was the historiographer for the AME Church for over, I think, 25 years.
Okay.
Dr. Dickerson,
Yeah.
PhD, Vanderbilt University.
Dr. Dickerson. I didn't want to name him, because I was like, Bishop Dickerson. So Dr. Dickerson wrote in the comments, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, the Black female scientist who was indispensable to developing the COVID vaccine, has much significance. Please speak on this compelling new reality. Yes, wonderful. I am grateful that the sister, Dr. Corbett, was available to and did her good work in creating the COVID vaccine. And I also want to point out that they commercialized her, this black woman, because people at the time were talking about Tuskegee Institute and the black people that were involved in the Tuskegee Institute issue. But they used her to say it's okay, black people, for you to take this. It's okay, world, because the black woman was instrumental in making sure we have this COVID vaccine. Also, a black woman was instrumental in identifying the Omicron virus in South Africa, so much so that it was a blaming on her and South Africans, South Africans, that there was an Omicron virus. So women at both sides of the spectrum of this new compelling reality, Black women as healers is not a new compelling reality. What is compelling and of this new reality is that they're being recognized and sometimes used to promote the fact that the healing is okay. And I also second what my sister, Dr. Diana, just said as well. So self-care, Genesis here, is a responsibility. So how we embrace Dr. Kismikia and the sister from South Africa, and there is a rising name in South Africa, Sister Siki, who they call the Blade, because she comes in and cuts up regimes like they're butter. How we use and present these women in a compelling new reality is up to us in protecting them and making sure that the narrative behind them is a holistic narrative and not something that is beneficial to Earthkind.
Ladies, this conversation is really, really good. And I know that Dr. Dickinson and Reverend Ruth, you have other things that you have to do. But this is really, really good. And so I hope that I'm not rushing by moving on. Let me recognize one of my sponsors that I'm blessed to have. And then I'm going to shift the conversation. And I'm hoping that in shifting the conversation, it's going to get really, really wild in here, because I can't wait to get your views on this. But give me 1 second. Let me recognize one of my sponsors.
Praise him with a violin.
Welcome. I'm Alphonse Allen, the senior pastor of Allen Temple AME Church.
And I'm personal injury attorney Blake Maislin, partnering together to bring you the Allen Temple broadcast.
Every Sunday morning at 11:30 on Star 64. We're reaching the city one soul at a time.
And now we're inviting you to join us.
Every Sunday morning at 11:30 on Star 64.
And we are back. So I want to shift the conversation. This has been good. And before I do shift the conversation, Genesis Wayne Player, she made a statement I wanted to recognize. It's self-care and learning to ourselves responsibly, shedding the norms of white dominant culture of perfectionism. So we don't want to lose that. We're going to come back to that because I have a follow-up question. But I want to shift the conversation to what inspired me to invite you ladies, and what has inspired me to do some sermon development. We're going to talk about some misconceptions of biblical women characters in the Bible. I'm gonna give you a name, and I want you to, if you can, expose some of the misconceptions. We're gonna start with Ruth. And I know Reverend Ruth did some of her graduate school work. She was published on Ruth.
Mhm.
She set Clubhouse ablaze with her interpretation of Ruth. And we had some of every kind of scholar on Clubhouse that day. She killed Clubhouse. And you get to see this face, and you're wondering, hearing her voice, okay, whose child is this? And who taught her to read? Because she can't be what she says she is. But when I got a chance to meet Reverend Ruth, I was like, oh man, y'all in for it today. So Ruth is our first one. Go ahead, Reverend Ruth.
Oh, my goodness. Ruth, bless her darling heart. Ruth is my actual maiden name. I have been married. I am a widow. So Ruth, I've always been fascinated by the book of Ruth. Ruth, again, is my maiden name. So I became attached to Ruth at a very early age. When I was able to read, I was reading the book of Ruth constantly throughout my life. And it wasn't until I became a widow is when I experienced Ruth. So, so having an autoethnographical, having written an autoethnographical paper about Ruth and widowhood, y'all. Okay, so you have a story of a woman, and at the beginning of the story, it's this, she tells Naomi, entreat me not to leave you. Where you go, I go. What you do, I do. Your God is your God, my God, and your people, my people. You got to understand the purpose of the book of Ruth. The purpose of the book of Ruth is not to, on behalf of the woman in the name that the book is after, is to set up the kingdom history of David. Let's be clear. So yeah, since Reverend Dr. Diana has to leave, can she go first before I go? Because it's a long explanation. Is that okay? I want to hear what she has to say.
Totally fine.
Okay. Because I have a little time. I made time.
So you want us to dive into Ruth?
I tell you what, let me go ahead and give you these three names because I want to get I got to have, sis, I got to have your input. So the three biblical characters that has been on my mind: Ruth, Bathsheba, and Citados. Do y'all know who Citados is? Have y'all heard of Citados?
Is this a character from the Apocrypha?
No, Citados or Citus is the wife of Job.
I did not know her name. Oh, I'm ready. Okay.
Yes! I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay. I did not know her name. So I'm just so excited, first of all, for her to be named. And I think let's just put a pin there, right? I wish I could hold on just a second. I'm sorry. I was fussing at my child. So, because if you hear a little feedback, that's Bluey in the background. But all right. So I want to start with the importance of naming. I can't remember the article off the top of my head, but within this kind of Afrocentric cosmological understanding of name and naming, we have to be mindful, not just in Africa, but elsewhere and beyond Africa. It's a continent with many cultures. Let's just say that it's not a country. Naming is so important, and there are naming ceremonies, and I think we have to just highlight that the fact that we don't know her name is problematic, right? She's just Lot's wife. And I think let's just kind of like really underline that most of the women in the Bible are not named. And when they are named, they're problematized, right? They're villainized in some way. I hear, a preacher talking about Vashti, right? We're not talking about Vashti today, but let's talk about, I can't remember how you said her name and how you pronounce it, but actually a couple of weeks ago, at Drill, I preached about Job's wife. And we always demonize her because we say, oh, well, she looked back. Don't be like Lot's wife. Don't be like Lot's wife because she looked back. Or don't be like Job's wife because, she said, curse God and die. Have we taken the time to think about what these women are losing in this moment, right? They're losing social status. They're losing land and what they knew. They may be losing servants to help them along the way. They're losing a certain level of comfort, a certain level of security. They're in grief, as Dr. Edie just said, right? They are grieving. They're in pain. They're in torment. And this man, their husband, you got to pick up everything and leave, or you need to just wait for God. Right. And so in the midst of that, I think we need to pull that out. If we're thinking about Ruth, if we're thinking about who was the other woman, Dr. Davis?
Bathsheba and Citados.
Bathsheba is raped.
Talk about it, Reverend.
I'm just gonna say it again. All right. Bathsheba is raped. David is the king. What is she gonna say? No. Women don't necessarily have rights in this society. Not to say that they have a lot of rights now, right? And so, with that being said, the other week I preached about Tamar. Tamar is being passed around from brother to brother to, she's just being passed around to everybody. And so, women's bodies in this way, even Ruth. I mean, let's talk about the threshing floor, right? These women are being passed around. They're being misused, abused. Once again, they're being viewed and not seen. They're being passed for the pleasures of men and not for themselves, right? And so I don't want to pull out so much because I think that we could there could be several books, volumes of books just written on each woman, right? And the myriad of things that she's dealing with. But I just want to highlight that all of these women are not being pleasured. They're being put in places of pain. And I'm not sure if that pain ever subsides or gets better or is solved, right? And so in that way, I think it's definitely problematic that we gloss over the ways in which the text is very problematic, the ways in which the text, kind of reinforces misogyny and sexism, and particularly in the way in which people preach. And I'm not just saying men, but when we don't go to seminary and get that education and learn how to do some exegetical work, when we don't sit with the text, maybe even not exposed to that Women's History Month course, not exposed to the woman of scholars like Dr. Weems, Dr. Floyd Thomas, different biblical scholars. I know Reverend Antonia mentioned some things, and I was thinking about matrifocal societies and how Stephanie Buchanan Crowder, who's a womanist biblicist, and her idea of womanist maternal thought. If we don't have that sort of hermeneutic to go along with the text, I think we'll really be in trouble. And I'll just kind of stop there.
Let me say before Reverend Ruth brings her commentary, because I'm excited. Again, ladies, thank you for having this conversation with me. I want to point out, just for added value, there were only 5 women mentioned in the Near Eastern genealogy of Jesus Christ. Only 5. You have Ruth, Bathsheba, Tamar, Mary, and did I do 5? Rahab. Only 5 women. And the significance to me the mentioning of women in the Near Eastern genealogy reflects the personhood of Jesus Christ. And it reflects reality. Had it not been for the women, Dr. Sabrina Joyce Ellis, the widow of one of the greatest preachers that one of the greatest preachers that influenced my life, Archbishop Jesse Delano Ellis II of PCC in Cleveland, who died during the pandemic. His wife, that he lifted up, that he loved publicly, that he encouraged to go to school, even after years of ministry, encouraged her to go back to school, to get her Master's of Divinity, to get her R&D Min, to do certification in counseling. He valued education, and he lifted up his wife for doing it. One of the books that she wrote, which was part of her dissertation, The Women Came First. Go get the book. Get it off of Amazon. Dr. Sabrina Joyce Ellis, The Women Came First. And one of the things that helped me to appreciate her work and the fact that there was women mentioned in Jesus' genealogy is that the reality is simply this: had it not been for the women, each woman played a significant role in understanding the isness of Jesus Christ. The other thing I want to mention real quick, Reverend Ruth, was that the first preacher I ever heard, Dr. Watkins Dixon, to ever say that Bathsheba was raped was Dr. William Wadley. He came to Columbus, Ohio, preached a revival at the historic St. Paul AME Church in Columbus, Ohio. And when I tell you, I don't know if it was a holy hush, but I know it was a hush that fell over the house. It was a hush that fell over the house. And it just, Negroes went from, say it, Reverend, talk, to, and folks standing around the church after the sermon, he wiping sweat, and folks standing around the church like, okay, what Bible commentary did he get that from? And can I buy that book? Because I ain't never heard that before. And it wasn't until I did my own work that I understood exactly what he was talking about. And let me just tell y'all, God has blessed me with one smart, beautiful, ebony fiance. Ooh, do y'all see what she just said in the comments? Bathsheba couldn't take a ritual bath in peace without being sexualized and called upon by King David. Bathsheba wasn't the issue. It's very similar to women attending church and being harassed by men. Let me tell y'all, the Lord has blessed me, with a smart black woman.
Brag on her, sir. Brag on her.
It's getting warm in here. Okay, go ahead, y'all. Y'all go ahead. Them shoes you want, Catherine, I'm gonna buy them. Amen.
You're starting off good, Doc. You're starting off good.
You starting off real good. And sis, yes, that's how. Okay, and since you said that, let me continue with that thought, sis. Yeah, but if you pay attention, can I just say that women in the Bible, the majority of them are sexualized purposefully? Because again, it is the possessiveness, the attentionness of the woman's body. Who is that? Dr. Ebony Marshall Terman, who speaks about the incarnation in her towards a womanist ethic, the incarnation of womanhood as it relates to the body of Christ. And we sexualize the encounter with John 4, the woman at the well, the unnamed woman at the well. We over sexualize the woman caught in adultery. We sexualize Bathsheba. Oh, she was taking a bath and she was on the roof. Baby, it was a ritual bath. And let's talk about the ritual. The ritual bath was after her menses. So
it was called Nitta. She was taking a mikvah bath.
Thank you.
Bath in the time of Nitta.
So King David is watching her taking this ritual bath and a cleansing period while menses is occurring. So what was he, since he was a bloodlust king any old way, what was he most attracted to? Was he attracted to her or the blood that he saw in the water?
And since you went there,
Yes.
let's add Abishag.
Mm.
The only way for them to determine if David had any life left in him was to bring this Shulamite girl, age 14,
Mm-hmm.
into the room.
His 80-year-old something
This
behind.
87-year-old man, and his doctors and priests came out and said the king did not rise, therefore the king was dead. Although the text says that he was not dead, he just didn't have any sexual arousal.
Right.
And so, overly sexualized. They bring in this young black 14-year-old girl to lay with David, and then commentaries will overlook the reality of that and say, well, she used her body warmth to keep him warm because he could not keep his own body heat. But I will also say, and I preached a sermon about Abishag, I will say that there is an appreciation for what David does. He does not sleep with her. He does not lay with her sexually. But because she was in his intimate space, she now becomes a consort of the king. She was a poor Shulamite girl. She now has an income for the rest of her life because she is a royal consort. And the reason why Adonijah had to die was because he tried to marry the king's consort, which was treachery. It was forbidden, which is why Solomon had to kill him. And it's also rumored that the woman Solomon loved and talked about in the Songs of Solomon was Abishag.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. Because about the youth, I can see that. Job's wife. Can we pivot just a little
Go
bit?
ahead. Citados. This is his first wife who made the statement, curse God and die.
So she died?
She died. So she dies from grief. So I had access to a Jewish commentary.
Okay.
It doesn't have a lot to say about Citados, whose name was Sittis, whose nickname was Sittis, rather. She was royal. Job was a tribal leader, and she was a princess from a local tribe that married Job.
Mm-hmm.
She dies of immediate grief, is what the commentary says. She dies of immediate grief. She begs Job to allow her to enter into the temple where the earthquake took place and her children died, to collect their bodies. But Job is so grief-stricken that he cannot remove himself from his sackcloth and ashes. And he forbade her to go in there. She enters anyway, sees the bodies of her children, and dies.
So while we singing songs about this poor woman in the midst of her grief, didn't he work it out? Didn't he work it out?
From your folks in Chicago?
Yeah, listen, I don't care who I come for. You know that. But we, cosmopolitan, they rock it.
Till the flesh fell from his bone.
Wife, cattle, and children, everything that he had was gone. Job looked at the woman, looked up, Job, you sound foolish, curse your God and die. The way we take these texts and then we sing songs of encouragement for our 21st century selves, speaks to our lack of wisdom and understanding and care for if we knew this other side of the story. I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, instant grief. the woman died of instant grief, and yet we gonna sit here and sing songs about, don't be like her. Um, it's the glory songs that we really need to pay attention to, and we really need to take care of. And please note that I will be going to my pastor and asking him that we need to not sing that verse of the song. All of those verses are pretty problematic, but that one for me is even more problematic. And see, that's the action part. We can sit here and we can talk about stuff, but until we put hands and feet to the conversation, until we say, listen, you know, I have a problem with you all talking of using entreat me not to leave thee in marital vows. Do you realize the level of desperation of a woman who had been married to her husband, and for the woman, there was love and there was joy between the women. So to be accused of not of saying, I want to be with you and you only, that is near a blood covenant, because you are giving up of yourselves and you're giving up of who you are to assign yourself, to attach yourself to a life that you don't know, to a society that you don't know, to rules and regulations that you don't know. Ruth didn't know the rules and regulations of Israel. And let's be clear, Ruth may not even be her real name. Ruth was a Moabite. Ruth is a Jewish name, it's an Israelite name. So is Orpah. Let's talk about Orpah real quick, because we always want to, say, oh, Orpah would turn her back on Naomi, and Orpah's name actually means nape of her neck. That is an Israelite name. That is not a Moabite name. We don't know who's the names of these women are. They're given names because of her assimilation, which is Ruth, which is loyal, and one due to her not wanting to be assimilated, which is the nape of her neck, which is a level of disrespect towards Naomi within the culture of Israelites, because Naomi told them to go back to the homes of your mothers, to go back. And they didn't. Ruth didn't. So she goes, and now, now her and Naomi enter into the town that was called the Bread. And the reason why they had to leave the house of bread is because the house of bread was experiencing a famine. And now they're back to the house of bread because things are supposed to be economically better. She goes to the land that her late husband had, that would have been given to her late children. And now she has this additional mouth here to feed. So the level of pain that Naomi is experiencing, and she didn't want to do anything. She's not taking care of it. So Ruth goes out and does it herself. Ruth goes out and takes care of the household. And so after some time, Naomi notices that, it's not out of love that Ruth gets with Boaz. Boaz doesn't see Ruth as a lover, as someone he is truly in love with. So before you all go out and tell these women to be like Ruth and get their Boaz,
Reverend,
we got to remember that this was a business transaction, slightly akin to a prostitute contracting with a John, or a geisha contracting with her Da'ana. Let's be clear. Let's be clear about what this really was. This was not a Brandon and Catherine moment. Because I am certain that Brandon and Catherine love each other. Am I correct?
You better believe it.
I am also correct to know that Brandon and Catherine is not a business transaction.
No, ma'am.
This is not a contract. The only contract that's going to occur is when they walk down to the county office to pick up their marriage license, which is the contract, which technically, if whoever signs the contract without a wedding, without all of these things and all the accoutrement that occurs when it comes to our way of thinking about marriage and thinking of marriage, if Reverend Antonia decides to sign off, the day I sign off is the day that they are married legally. Let's be clear. Marriage occurred as a business transaction. Go over to the book of Leviticus, either the 24th or the 25th chapter, or both of those chapters, because one explains the Levirate marriage contract, and the other one explains the contract that took place after the action on the threshing floor. Now, we don't know. We don't know. The Bible isn't clear as to what actually happened on the threshing floor. But let me tell you, the threshing floor was more for just beating the grains. The threshing floor was where the pre-contracts and the pre-business transactions occurred. The threshing floor was the place where, Naomi said, go see, put on your red dress and put on your high heels and your sweet perfume. You got to make sure you look good, and then go find out where he sleeps, and then sleep with him. And, the text, I can't think of the Hebrew word at this time, but the text says she slept at his feet. And I remember growing up in the Union Gospel Press, and they had the white man and the white woman, and they was laying at the feet, the feet on the floor. But in conversation with my Hebrew professor, feet, this is the only place in the Bible that feet means male genitalia. So when she laid at his feet, whatever position she laid, she made sure that she laid at his feet. And when he was startled and said, "Who is this?" he didn't probably know that if anything occurred, because usually what occurs at the threshing floor is a beating. So he didn't know or possibly realized it because he was so drunk. And because of the woman that she was, Boaz was an honorable man because he obeyed the rules. He treated her well, not just because she was beautiful, but because she was a foreigner. The rules state, the law state, you treat the foreigner well. So yes, he knew that she was a foreigner. So yes, okay. And if I had done anything misappropriate with this woman that I don't remember, who is a foreigner, then I need to be the one. But let me help you. There's someone who is closer to you. So let me take care of that. But stay here with me. And he throws the coat over her. And we are left to our imagination to see where the warmth of the diamond mind of Ruth ever got engaged with the digger of Boaz. So we're left with that. She goes back to Naomi and tells Naomi what happened. And then Naomi is like, okay, cool. Just sit and wait. Here's the waiting. The waiting isn't wait for the sexual encounter. The waiting is not the okay, we're going to see what this, and we have to wait for the man to even decide that he wants to come to you, and then wait for the man to decide which one of the women that he's going to choose, and then you become a pick-me and decide to do everything and anything that you want the man to do to get his attention, and cook some food, be the pretend wife, be the pre-wife without the sex, so that he'll be able to tell. We say these things wrong to our women in the church, and it spills over into society, because yeah, the unchurched know about the story between Ruth and Boaz, because you got all these means, Noah's, his ass, all this stuff. We trivialize this moment with this woman Ruth, whose body was used not for her pleasure, not for her food, but the restoration of Naomi's position in the community. That's who this book is really about. It's the restoration of Naomi after her loss. It's not because after the contract, after the near relative, he was like, okay, at the gate, yo, look, here's Naomi's land, and they need the kinsman redeemer, the Goel, to come and take care, but you also have to take Ruth, because there are people who don't consider, there's so many layers, who don't consider the desire, the foreigner to be desirable, the foreigner to have a comeuppance. He was like, no, that's too much. You go ahead. So he really took off his shoe, threw the shoe, because that was a signal of the contract being given to Boaz. He released himself. Boaz, you go do it. They get married. Ruth has a baby. Naomi takes the baby. And then Ruth suffers narrative death afterwards.
And don't forget, Boaz died like the next day.
Well, let's be clear. There are various different stories. There are various different midrashes that says, some says that he dies the next day after the contract, and then there are some that says that he lived and he was able to do all these things. Ruth suffering narrative death and Boaz suffering a death benefits the story that brings David into the world, and benefits the line of bringing David into the world. So Boaz has done his thing, let's kill him off, and then Ruth has done her thing, let's kill her off, because the story is Naomi's restoration and Naomi's redemption, because Ruth, in the story at the beginning, she was Ruth the Moabitess. But in that part in chapter 3 and early chapter 4, she's just Ruth. And then at the end, she goes back to being Ruth the Moabitess, who loved Naomi, who changed, who assimilated into the story. How a widow reads the story is a lot different, because grief makes you bargain and business transact. Ooh, so many things. You agree to do things that you've never decided to do before, and you hit a threshing floor. You go to a threshing floor that you've never would have considered yourself being there. And so, widowhoods or widows are one of the favorite classes of God. Let's be clear. And how we treat widows and how we use widows to benefit the good of other people. So we have no more husbands. So our lives are no longer our own. Our lives are no longer, we have no need to have pleasure, because the person who was to love us the most is now gone. And now what? So yeah, you're going to tell the mother-in-law that I will entreat you not to leave you, because I have nothing. I have nothing. I have no one. There is no one here that's going to take care of me. There is no one here. So to have this story of Ruth being used as a guide for single women means that you take the garment of widowhood which is the garment of lack, insufficiency, low self-esteem, grief beyond measure, grief that comes in waves. And you place it on top of single women who've never had this feeling or this level of grief or this understanding of labelism. You put that on top of them and say, now go live like Ruth. And then you criticize them for having premarital sex. The madness needs to stop. The madness needs to stop.
Reverend Ruth, you are phenomenal. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You are phenomenal. Diana, before you have to leave, I want to ask you both a question, and then we're going to bring the show to a quick end. But let me just recognize another sponsor, and then we'll be right back.
Recently, God opened the door for J.P. Moore Mortuary and Cremation Services to expand into the Madison, Florida area, allowing us to provide stellar yet affordable services to families in need, families who are looking to honor the life of their loved one in the customs and traditions of our cultural experience. J.P. Moore Mortuary and Cremation Services offers compassionate and courteous service with unmatched satisfaction and a professional staff that can serve your family in a difficult time with dignity. The top 11 reasons why families call J.P. Moore Mortuary and Cremation Services are that we offer funeral services, cremation services. We have an on-premise chapel. We have J.P. Silk Creations, our on-premise florist. We offer grief counseling. We have 24-hour on-call service, at-home arrangements, out-of-town services. We have digital casket display. We offer air flight shipping. And we have reasonable and competitive pricing with a complimentary notary public. Spreading sunshine at the sunset of life. J.P. Moore Mortuary and Cremation Services. The mortician who cares more.
Brothers and sisters, we are back. What an amazing conversation we have had this morning with Dr. Diana Watkins Dickinson and the Reverend Antonia Ruth. This has been amazing. I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. Before I get to my signature question within context, I want both Dr. Watkins Dickinson and Reverend Ruth to assess womanhood in the following categories. And feel free to be as honest as the Spirit leads you. Religion, society, politics, business, education. Dr. Dickinson? You're muted.
Repeat it for me. Religion,
Society, politics, business, and education. And I'll put it on the screen.
Okay, yeah, please. So within religion, first of all, I want to say, Reverend Ruth, you are the biblical scholar. You did such a great job just kind of pulling that. I said, you know what? I'm not going to jump in. She did such an excellent job, I think, pulling that apart. So a hand clap of praise to you, my sister. And with that being said, I think what happens is that once again, you know, within our religious spaces, not just within Christian spaces, I would probably argue in other spaces as well, women are just not given a voice, even though they're central to the conversation. They're central to the ways in which we understand what sanctification looks like, but more importantly, the way that we should understand salvation. The salvation narrative really and truly outside of God and God's self, right, begins and ends with women. And so I think when women don't have the opportunity to preach, women, I have conversations with all sorts of friends that are either male or female in denominations that ordain women or recognize women in various ways. And even my own experiences in the AME church versus the Baptist church, or even in the military. I think when women are allowed to be at the forefront of the conversation in religious spaces, we can really and truly see them thriving spiritually and emotionally, psychologically. And so I would just foot stomp everything that my sister has said about these texts, but more importantly, as both of us identify as womanists, I would say that that allows Black women's voices to be centered and to be heard in a very particular way, and also in a way that they can thrive. And that reaches out into all of these other spaces. I think we forget the way in which religion really bleeds. I think that language is really appropriate here, but bleeds into society, politics, business, and education. If we think about it, if our women are not seen, we talked about that earlier, right? If they're not seen in our religious spaces and within those contexts, they're not going to be seen and appreciated in society, politics, business, and education. Because within that, if we can just kind of group all of this together, just the way in which now Vice President Kamala Harris was portrayed during the election cycle, and the banners and on the side of interstates, T-shirts that were made to try and place her in this category of Jezebel, or maybe even we can kind of argue strong Black woman, the different caricatures that she was placed within at the highest level of competition in politics, right? To be the leader of the United States of America, and now she's second in charge, right? The way in which our theology and the way in which we identify as Christians, these are good church going folk, good people on both sides, right? And still getting off, and I'm using that phrase on purpose, right? Getting off on mammifying, on casting one as Jezebel, strong Black woman, or casting someone in this space of the villain, right? And so in that way, I see Miss Genesis player saying, yes, hyper visibility. And so this tension between being hyper visible, but also the tension of being invisible. And many times, you know, it's both and, right? They kind of happen together. And so when we see these things in society, and when we see the ways in which women are silenced, where they're oppressed, they're repressed, and they become depressed. Even in the business world, you typically will not see a woman, even a Black woman, at the height of a business until the business is going under, right? That happens more often than not. Less than 3% of tenured faculty are Black women. I could talk about statistics in the military, those that are officers. It's often assumed, oh, you're in the military. Well, first of all, they don't think I'm in the military, right? I have stories for days about that. But they definitely don't think I'm an officer, and they definitely don't think I might outrank the person I'm with. I was traveling a couple years ago, pre-COVID, with my religious affairs airmen, or we formerly call them chaplain assistants. And this is the person that's answering to me, right? And I'm the officer in charge, and we're at the airport. We're, getting our tickets, we're getting our rental car, and all of these different things. And, the person at the counter automatically says, okay, sir, well, what would y'all like to do? Now, we weren't in uniform. I will say, we're both married to other people. And so I don't know if they thought that, oh, this is just the man, this is her husband, or whatever the case is. And even after he learned we were on orders, he still went to him and asked, so what are y'all going to do? And the one thing I will credit him in saying is that he said, ma'am, what would you like to do? And I actually had somewhat said something and warned him, like, this is going to be interesting. We're going to the middle of Wisconsin. I don't know what people are going to think. But when we don't have these hard conversations sometimes, and also too, when men in those spaces don't stand up and don't speak truth to power and don't, take responsibility and say, no, she's in charge, or no, she has a voice, then we really start to get in trouble. And I would just say that this conversation has been great. I could go on and on and on, but really and truly, I think it does begin in our theological, our spiritual, our religious spaces, and uplifting those women. Because if it wasn't for the women, we would not be at this part of the story. We wouldn't be at this end, because the men were at home. The men were at home crying and upset and depressed and all of this other stuff. And the women got up early. And had it not been for them sharing, even in spite of the doubt that came after, then the good news would not have been preached and later received.
Dr. Dickinson, wow. Thank you so much. Reverend Ruth, I want you to share your thoughts. Please assess. Let me recognize Dr. Dickinson's comment, Dr. Dennis Dickinson. Please, young scholars, continue to speak and publish, because your insights and striking new intellectual directions have to infiltrate what constitutes knowledge in all of our scholarly disciplines. Congratulations for your daring and unapologetic thinking. Thank you, sir, for your constant support and encouragement for writing, being scholarly, and for producing new insight and thought to what we do in the church and within society. Thank you, sir. Reverend Ruth, I want you to assess where we are.
Thank you.
Religion, society, politics, business, education. Pick one, and
Well, I'll do it this way. Thank you, Dr. Dickerson. I was going to give up writing, but you've encouraged me to write. This past week and next week, I've been participating with the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation, and Remediation, along with McCormick Theological Seminary and the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, which is a non-governmental organization of the United Nations. I have been participating in the 66th Annual Commission on the Status of Women. You will find some information about that at the unwomen.org. 66th Annual. So that means within the past 66 years, the UN has decided to focus on the empowerment and promoting women's rights within the globe. Now, I am an eco-womanist, and an eco-womanist is an individual who acknowledges that the trauma that is occurring with the earth aligns with the trauma that occurs with the with women who are in the African diaspora. So with those levels of trauma, we experience trauma in each of those categories that you have on the screen. I foot stomp. I like that, Dr. Diana's sister. I'm going to use that. I foot stomp everything that you have said, and also want to, acknowledge the fact that yes, we women are making more money than they ever have. Women are athletic. Serena, Venus. Women are making money. Black women. There are Black women micro businesses that are successful and thriving. There are women who have voice in education, then creating. I think of Dr. Iva Carruthers, who started out, with TK Quest, which was a computer programming with IBM, and educational programming, and Know Your Heritage, if you remember that, and Reading Rainbow with LeVar Burton. So politics, we talk about Kamala and Auntie Maxine, but there was also a Shirley Chisholm. There was also a Callie House. There was also there were also women in the society. You know, we talk about the Black Panthers, but the women who stood behind the Black Panthers, who was the ones cooking the food and making sure that the children were gathered. You have those sisters, the women in religion. I'll go back to Tekla, and the Order of Widows, who were the ones that were funding ministries and projects. So the where we are is where we've always been. The issue is, where are we going? How and what are we going to do to get there? Are we going to continue this gratuitous, and be surprised that a woman is brilliant, and be surprised that a woman is awesome, be surprised that women are doing these wonderful things? Or are we going to uplift all sisters? Are we going to, we in the Americas, in the United States of America, are sit under a privilege that our sisters in Africa do not have, that our sisters in India are stressed with, and that our sisters in Seychelles are troubled by? Is our freedom and our comeuppance, or our achievements, are they just okay? Or are we concerned about the globe itself? Are we concerned or just about the women on over here, and not concerned about the women? I don't know where my hand is, over there. What are we doing? Is where we are is what we've always been doing. And cycling, we've all, okay, they give us a little bit. Had a sister tell me that she preached and her daughters preached and was gifted a fruit tray, yet her husband was paid a paycheck. This is where we are, and we still where we are, because we're at the 66th annual Commission on Women. But where are we going? What are our hands and our feet are doing? Thank you, Dr. Brandon, for the platform and remembering. But what Women's Her Story happens 365, just like Black History. That is what I assess where we are. It's not necessarily where we are. Where are we going to go from here, and how are we going to do it, and when we going to get it done?
Ladies, thank you so much. That was amazing. I just don't know what to say. I am constantly in a mode of appreciation for the mind of Black women. Diana and I had a conversation that included the first and the fourth elected woman in the episcopacy of the AME Church. We talked about theological misogyny, and what a powerful conversation to have included District Evangelist Jacqueline Melton, Dr. Jamie Edie Chisholm, and of course Bishops Vashti Murphy McKenzie and Bishop Elizabeth Ann Henning Byfield. What an amazing conversation. And from that conversation, I can honestly say I'm constantly rewatching it, because just to hear the intellectual thoughts and the intellectual prowess of our sisters, of our mothers, of our friends, our colleagues, it's amazing, because it's pushing me to think differently. I'm not the same as I used to be. I used to brag about my Southern roots, but there are some things that I have, especially now that I'm getting married, I think about. And I want to make sure that I'm not projecting some of the stuff that young Black men have considered to be character traits to model after onto my bride. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I want to be a good man, and I want to be a man who respects the voice and opinions of my wife. And that's important to me. But from a theological, biblical, social, educational, philosophical perspective, thank you, because you all are constantly pushing us to be better. You're constantly pushing us to think better, to look at the text. I've been preaching 28 years. I can't tell you that I think the way I used to when I started preaching at 9 years old. I heard that foolishness. You know, oh, Joe's wife told to curse God and why? You know, curse God and die. She lost her faith in God, and you can't listen to women like that. Brothers this and brothers that. I heard folks talk. I listened and applauded and jumped and hollered back at the preacher when they talked about Bathsheba trying to seduce the king. But when you actually read the text and when you sit with the text, you discover that's not what happened. I've heard preachers and scholars talk about, Ruth and Boaz, and to trivialize the contract, Reverend Ruth. Thank you for that. To trivialize the contract. Dr. Dickinson, we have, thank you for pointing out something new for me to reflect on when you talk about Lot's wife. She was grief stricken. She didn't look back out of disobedience. She didn't look back because she cared more about what she left. She was grief stricken. And grief, I've learned from conversation with Reverend Ruth, grief will push you to places, thoughts, feelings, emotions you never thought you would be in because of grief. So, ladies, I just want to thank you. I really appreciate you making this possible. I'm sorry that I'm sorry that Chanel Oliver wasn't able to make it. She kept having complications with Google Chrome. Google Chrome, fix that, please. We need to access StreamYard without all of that, extra downloading and stuff. But ladies, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule this morning to be with me today to articulate this conversation. And before I close, I always ask this question. And so if you can, ladies, before you go, in context, define the term unholy silence. Dr. Dickinson. Oh, well, she pointed to Reverend Ruth.
Define the term unholy silence. Unholy silence is not quiet. Unholy silence is the rejection of an individual's space and place. An unholy silence speaks to the neglect that brothers, when you refuse to protect a Black woman and her womanhood. Unholy. And you can say and you can stand next to me, but your silence is unholy when you do not protect me or my nieces. That is unholy silence. Sis, see you in the morning.
Yes, ma'am. We sure will see each other in the morning. And with that being said, I seek the Pink Robe Chronicles almost every drill weekend on my way to this space that in many ways is definitely where I'm called to be. Let's be clear. But in many ways, it is difficult as a Black woman, dealing with your Blackness, your womanhood, your femininity, motherhood and mothering, what that looks like. And so in that space, I've really been encouraged to understand that the ways in which I was silent were not just unholy, but not necessarily makes me culpable for other people's silence, but in many ways, I think you have to teach people how to treat you. Ntozake Shanjay, in her choreo poem, one of the women, basically is saying, I want to be handled warmly. It's not just that I'm delicate as a woman and I can't do things, but it's that we all have emotions, we all have hearts, we all have minds and spirits that are very much affected by the ways people handle us. And so I think that it's unholy for us, in the words of Zora Neale Hurston, when you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. And so, in another way, I say, this is I don't know what tribe this is from, an African proverb, but silence is also speech. And so, just because someone is verbally or physically silent, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, right? So much can be happening under the surface. And so, I think we have to speak up and speak out. Obviously, as a rhetorician, that's what I look for. That's what I aim to do. I aim to do that by being a participant in places like the Pink Robe Chronicles. I aim that by being a leader as a scholar, but also too as I'm moving up in the military, so to speak, as I've made more rank and I've had more experiences. But that's also speaking up for others when they don't necessarily have the opportunity and the space to do so. And so within that, I believe that there are so many ways that we can be silent, and that the place where the holiest of holies, where God can meet us and meet other people, we get in the way of that by not speaking truth to power.
Ladies, once more again, I applaud you. I am grateful that I have you as my friends and my colleagues. Um, I have Reverend Ruth and I was back and forth trying to figure out how to get this done. I wanted to celebrate HerStory Month. And let me just say, it's important for me to say, because of Dr. Leah Gaskin Fitzhugh, it's important for me to say HerStory Month and not Women's Month. Because, and I want to say this carefully, within society, white women are celebrated a lot more than black women. During the Trump presidency, you had women who were against Donald Trump, who were taking days off from work and school and life to go to DC and to protest. That was a luxury for white women. That was not a reality for black women. You can leave work and not be penalized. You can leave home and things don't fall apart. But for a black woman to just up and take off and go to DC to protest Donald Trump's election, a lot would have happened. It would have been a domino effect of all kinds of troubles in a black home with a single mother, or in a black home with a husband and a wife. Black women make the world go round. And I will always push myself to try to understand, because I know I never will fully understand, but to try to better understand, to use inclusive language in preaching, and to use inclusive exegetical work, to be inclusive in my exegesis of scripture. And all of that I learned because I attended and graduated from Payne Theological Seminary in Wilberforce, Ohio. And that I had a president who did not mind getting in your face and questioning your homiletics, your exegesis, your response to society. Thank God for the blessed memory of the Reverend Dr. Leah Gaskin Fitzhugh. Amen. Thank God for her. So, ladies, again, thank you. I appreciate you. This could not have been possible without you. Thank you for your time. We've been here longer than I thought, but this conversation just kept getting gooder and gooder. And so, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Reverend Ruth, as well.
Thank you for having us, Dr. Brandon. Dr. Diana, Girl, see you in the morning. Don't
Yes,
forget your
ma'am.
water.
I will not. Yes, ma'am.
We were
Listen,
ready.
ladies, you are amazing. I hope you have a wonderful day, and that today will be a good day, better than it was yesterday. Per usual, conversation with faith leaders is a conversation that allows me an opportunity to bring in a plethora of people, a myriad of folks, to talk about things from not just an intellectual standpoint, but from a place of familiarity, a place of deep personal feeling. I strive to bring conversations that are relevant to the culture, relevant to the times, and conversations that will help people to have a better understanding of what is happening within our life. And so I'm grateful to have friends and colleagues who help me to make these conversations possible. My name is Brandon A.J. Davis. I'm the founder of Content Writing Service and the host of Conversations with Faith Leaders. And as always, I try to leave you with a quote. And today I would like to lift up this quote from the Reverend Canon Kelly Delane Brown Douglas, PhD, who is an African American Episcopal priest, womanist theologian, and the inaugural dean of the Episcopal Divinity School at Union Theological Seminary. She is also the canon theologian at the Washington National Cathedral. Dr. Brown Douglas says, through the resurrection, God responds to the violence of the cross, the violence of the world, in a non-violent but forceful manner. It is important to understand that nonviolence is not the same as passivity or accommodation to violence. Rather, it is a forceful response that protects the integrity of life. Violence seeks to do another harm, while nonviolence seeks to rescue others from harm. It seeks to break the very cycle of violence itself. That God could defeat the unmitigated violence of the cross reveals the consummate power of the nonviolent, life-giving force that is God. This has been Conversation with Faith Leaders. We have had a wonderful time, and I appreciate all of you who have been here since 9 o'clock this morning. To our panelists, the Reverend Dr. Diana Watkins Dickerson and the Reverend Antonia Ruth, my heart's appreciation. Thank you. Look forward to more conversations in the near future. So please tune in to Conversation with Faith Leaders, Facebook, and on YouTube. And we'll see you again. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, keep social distance. COVID-19 is still a reality. And if you're going out into the public, just be careful. God love you, God keep you, and we'll see you next time.